Good morning, everybody. On this day after Christmas, hopefully you had an incredible Christmas day yesterday. We have big time warmth across portions of the Mid-South and the southeastern U.S. and had 70s temperatures across the southeastern U.S., 80 degrees in the south central U.S., and some of those locations in Texas had temperatures warmer yesterday on Christmas Day than the temperatures on July 4th. So just an incredible situation there. But we have a lot to talk about out west, too. Big time snow hammering portions of the Mountain West. A very cold atmospheric river still happening out there. A lot of cold temperatures aloft as well. Happening, and you can see all those alerts across the western U.S. Winter storm warnings are in pink, avalanche warnings are in blue, and you can see that those winter storm warnings extend through the Colorado Rockies, including the higher terrain of Utah, as well as portions of the northwestern U.S. But the area that's really getting hammered are the Sierra Nevadas, and looks like snow totals are going to continue to be measured in feet out there. Here is the latest GFS snowfall totals for the west. Over the next 80 hours, it looks like up to 4 feet across some of the higher terrain there in the Sierra Nevadas, including Donner Pass all the way down toward Truckee. A little bit less in Truckee, just to the east of those ridges along Donner Pass, but definitely the western slopes are going to have some of those greater totals that could even be 4 or 5 feet out there near Soda Springs up toward Donner Pass, and then a little bit less on the western side. But you can also see a couple of feet of snow coming over the next 80 hours in Colorado there as well, and that's why you have those avalanche warnings that do include portions of the Front Range. Not as much in Colorado as you're getting out west in California, where the Sierra Nevadas are just squeezing out that moisture. But a lot of this is due to that cold air. And that's in the low levels all the way down to the ocean surface. This is 700 millibars. You can see that purple pumping into the Pacific Northwest there. California bringing much needed precipitation out there in California, including the higher terrain. Snowfall totals have already been measured in feet. We've had a couple of waves, many waves of this atmospheric river, this fat chuff of the North Pacific. It doesn't have as much of a subtropical connection, so you have a lot of that cold air just above the ground, extending all the way down to the ocean surface. Here is 850 millibars, just above sea level. Look at that cold pocket of air coming into western Washington today. Winter weather advisories continue up there. Ocean effect snow happening, including the coastline of Oregon, where winter storm warnings continue there, all the way down to sea level. But that ocean effect snow, basically cellular snow coming in, wave after wave of very heavy snow, grapple happening there. Definitely getting squeezed out by some of that higher terrain near those coastal ranges, even coastal ranges of hills, lower terrain, definitely squeezing out that moisture. And that cold air is starting to invade northern and central California there as well. And that's going to continue to squeeze out that moisture. But basically, east of the Rockies, temperatures are incredibly warm. And that includes the Gulf of Mexico as well, where the moisture is sitting down there, a reservoir of dew points into the 70s, just sitting in the Gulf of Mexico, waiting to be pumped off to the north. And the Storm Prediction Center still has a day 4 risk of severe weather. That's December 29. Looks like it's going to be more of a nocturnal threat there in the evening, Wednesday evening of the 29th. But certainly some severe weather to close out this incredibly active fall into winter of 2021. A record-breaking December. Hundreds of tornadoes happening there. 2 big outbreaks with 50-plus tornadoes on December 10 and 11 and December 15. And it looks like the big-time trough ejection on January 1st and 2nd definitely has some similarities to that December 10 and 11 event. It's picking up a closed low that's off of Baja. We have that slingshot effect that we talk about so much here during these live briefings, and how important that is for the severe weather to materialize during the winter. And basically a parent trough will dive down the Pacific Northwest, pick up that closed low off of Baja, and then drag it across the central and southern U.S. And it looks like if that scenario happens on December 1st and 2nd, then I do think that there is a decent chance of severe weather across the Mid-South. But basically we have dominating snow across the Mountain West, severe weather potential across the Mid-South on December 29th and January 1st and 2nd, but record-breaking warmth leading up to that. And I think that January 1st and 2nd event might bring down some Arctic air back behind it. But looking at the long range, I'm not really seeing any of those gigantic Arctic blasts that are just going to sweep out the Gulf of Mexico. It looks to me like we're going to have this severe weather potential, the tendency for a western U.S. trough to form, that high pressure dominating the southeastern U.S., the eastern Gulf of Mexico down to the Caribbean, and that subtropical ridge down there off the southeastern U.S. is pivotal to maintaining that moisture in the Gulf of Mexico, those 70s dew points out there. So here is the California situation. We got a lot of cold air coming in as well here at 8:50. Very moist flow coming in as well into California. A lot of snow. Snow is going to be measured in feet out there in California. Let me break down this just a bit here. These temperatures, colder temperatures, definitely are going to be coming in to the western U.S. But I first want to break down the latest on the long range. We'll shimmy on back to severe weather. I really want to focus in on that December 29th event. And the reason being because the Storm Prediction Center has that 15% risk area out. That's why I went live yesterday on Christmas Day with that 15% risk out. Mainly the point of going live yesterday, though, was to show that this event on the 29th is kind of one of those preceding lower end events across the Mid-South. So Mother Nature definitely shows us some clues as we're leading up to these big time events, because it tends to repeat itself as you get locked into these patterns, especially when you have dominant forcing in the Pacific, like a La Nina in the tropical Pacific that is maturing right now, a year 2 La Nina, and that's shipping out cold, relatively cold sea surface temperatures up along the eastern periphery of the Pacific Ocean. That leads to a cold PDO, a negative PDO horseshoe across the northeastern periphery of the Pacific, and that's been in place the late summer into the fall and into the winter, and that's why we've had this very active severe weather that really began in October in Oklahoma with those initial tornado events, October 10 and October 12. We had the Clinton tornado there to the west of Oklahoma City, some confirmed tornadoes even in Norman as well, and then we had those events in November. We had the Purdon tornado in Missouri, the tornado near Beaumont in southeastern Texas. Then we had the record-breaking December 10 and 11 event, and that was one where a trough was diving down, the parent trough diving across the Pacific Northwest, and it picked up that closed low off Baja and then dragged it across the central and southern U.S., leading to that quad state tornadic supercell that had the 2 long track EF4 tornadoes as well. But remember that leading up to that December 10 and 11 event, we did have some preceding severe weather, some lower end severe weather across eastern Tennessee. We also had that tornadic supercell just to the south of Alexandria. And this December 29 event, I believe, is going to be one of those preceding lower end events. And that trough that is currently causing all the winter weather alerts across the western U.S. dives south. It doesn't pick up a closed upper low off of Baja and just shears out over top of this ridge. See this ridge just dominating down here over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, southeastern U.S. down to the Caribbean. Basically, the southerly flow on the western edge of the surface reflection of that high is helping to maintain that deeper moisture off the Gulf of Mexico. But this trough doesn't quite have the amplitude to dig in to the Mid-South and excite a powerful and backed low-level jet across multiple states. You can see it's basically a flat system that turns into a jet streak. The next system, though, that's going to dive south off of California, this one's going to close off Baja, very similar to what happened on December 10 and 11. A little bit different because it does get squeezed off and pinched off here and then closes off the Baja before this was connected a bit more to a more dominant trough axis and then still pinched off of a Baja. But you could definitely see the tendency for those troughs to pinch off of Baja, and then another system, a kicker system, will dive south across the western U.S. and pick up that upper level system. But look at this thing close off California, bringing with it some, and then there's your dominant jet streak surging south across western Canada, the Pacific Northwest, and this is going to be your parent system. This is a closed lower, the kickball down there that is off Baja, California. This is the leg or the kick that's going to come in and then pivot this out in front of it. But the timing of these two systems is critical because this system arriving to the Pacific Northwest needs to arrive soon enough to pick up this system before it just disappears off out over the open Pacific, where it'll just spin down. But it looks like this system's going to be slow enough to pick up this closed upper low off of Baja and then get that tandem trough ejection This is on New Year's Day, so this is the morning of the last day of 2021. You can see our ridge flattens out a little bit, extends west over the Gulf of Mexico. Big moisture just sitting there, waiting over the Gulf of Mexico. We can look at that dew point map and look at those 70s dew points, a big reservoir of dew points just sitting off of the Gulf of Mexico. That's a big problem right there, because that purple is fuel, just rocket fuel for a big time tornado event. And it looks like there's going to be that tandem trough ejection that's going to be coming through on January 1st and 2nd. That's going to excite a low level jet. Basically, southerly winds about a kilometer up above in the squeeze play between that ridge over the southeastern U.S. and that trough that comes in. And that tandem trough ejection is key, because that gives the trough enough amplitude as it moves in to the mid-south to excite that low-level jet, and then that will lead to big-time severe weather with that rocket fuel sitting over the Gulf of Mexico. So here's your kickball. Here's the leg coming in across the western U.S., very similar to that December 10 and 11 event. And look at this parent system, a lot of flow on the backside, still deepening in amplitude, and its timing is just perfect to pick up this kickball, launch it up in a pivot mechanism out ahead of this trough, and it's also enough to maintain amplitude for the whole entire complex as it digs into the western U.S. to excite a powerful low-level jet in the squeeze play regime between that high pressure. Look at this thing. Basically gives it a neutral tilt, an embedded negatively tilted trough axis as well on its eastern periphery. And this is going to be day one of that severe weather on January 1st down here. Southeastern Great Plains into the mid-south. You've got that ridge of high pressure over the eastern Gulf of Mexico and the southeastern U.S. The squeeze play between those features is going to excite a prolific low-level jet across multiple states, eastern Texas, Louisiana, southern Arkansas, pushing into the Mississippi River Valley, Mississippi, western Tennessee there with time. The exact locations of the severe weather are still suspect, but this is the night of New Year's Day. 70-knot low-level jet punching into western Tennessee, northern Mississippi as well. You can click anywhere within that and you're going to have tornado soundings. Massive photograph there as well, showing you that immense wind shear that's going to be in place. That's a photograph that's eerily similar to those across the warm sector on December 10 and 11. You've got your 1 kilometer wind pushing 60 knots there. You have enough directional shear between 1 kilometer and the mid and upper levels of the troposphere to force a more northeasterly storm motion, rapid storm motions at 60. And this is the type of photograph that also is very common for these really long track tornadic supercells. And as you can see, the GFS here, these global models are underdoing the strength of that elevated mix layer when you're dragging that closed upper low over northern Mexico, over that Mexican plateau. That's going to bring with it some dry air in the mid-levels of the troposphere that's going to steepen those lapse rates. You're going to have more instability than these global models are showing. And right now, at least based on this 60 GFS, of course, we need to look at the 12Z, but I've been watching this run after run after run and just picking up on the clues that Mother Nature has provided so far leading up to this, realizing the global teleconnections as well with the Pacific, with the year 2 La Nina maturing, the negative PDO up there, the tendency for this western U.S. trough, and just watching it play out. The big snow in the western U.S., Sierra Nevadas up to the Pacific Northwest, up into the mountains of western Canada are all pretty similar. One thing that is different with this trough ejection is, at least right now, it looks like the timing is such that it should be more of an East Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas event pushing into western Tennessee, western Kentucky. But at least so far, that instability axis doesn't rocket up into the Ohio River Valley like the Midwest up into the lower Great Lakes. The instability gets pinched off across the Mid-South a little bit. But right now, it looks like there's going to be a squall line that's going to march toward the western Carolinas for January 2nd as well. So I could even see Sunday the 2nd happening across portions of the southeast. Look at that, southeastern Alabama, central southern Alabama, into central and northern Georgia, pushing into the western Carolinas as well. So I do think that severe weather is going to push east with time with this one as well, similar to what happened with that last event. And eventually that skinny squall line with some embedded tornadic circulations passed all the way through eastern Tennessee, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, and eventually into the western Carolinas, where you still had some supercell structures, some embedded tornado vortices in there. And I do think that we're going to see something similar January 1st and 2nd, with some decent shear hanging on as that trough shears out over top of that dominant anticyclone over the southeastern U.S. But this one definitely has some amplitude before it shears out. You could see that anticyclone here down off the southeastern U.S., and this is definitely punching into the southeastern U.S. Looks like the second is also going to be a pretty substantial severe weather event. This is a textbook trough ejection to bring that severe weather into the western Carolinas and to the east of the Appalachians. You go down to the 1 kilometer flow, and look at that low-level jet getting concentrated down there to the east of those Appalachian Mountains. That looks like a severe weather event that's going to push into the western Carolinas as well, and push down into eastern Georgia, eventually pushing into the central Carolinas, but the exact timing is still important. But different than that December 10 and 11 trough ejection, this one definitely has a lot more amplitude as it pushes into the southeastern U.S. You can see this embedded negatively tilted trough here, basically maintaining its tandem trough ejection as it traverses the entire central and eastern U.S. So, and you can also see that this is obviously not going to bring down Arctic air from the higher latitudes up into Canada. So I don't think that winter is even going to start after this system, and we're just going to keep on getting. Look at this next system coming in to California there. That's going to begin the whole cycle likely. And we'll have just this entire winter of big severe weather with a Gulf of Mexico that just simply does not get cleaned out. Well, this one does a little bit. So it does look like this January 1st and 2nd system clears out the Gulf of Mexico a bit. So it does try to pull down a bit of some Arctic air. And once you get those 40s dew points into the northern Gulf of Mexico, that could shut down this crazy severe weather pattern that we've had throughout the winter. But you can still see those deeper dew points sitting over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico down into the Caribbean in the very long range. And I wouldn't be surprised if those are able to be pulled back northward. But it does look like this should help to end the southern U.S. severe weather, this record-breaking warmth. But the crazy warmth usually comes with a price like this during winter. So when you're getting these 70 to 80 degree temperatures and you're running around in your shorts, mountain biking, running down these running paths in your shorts, just getting a beautiful tan, hunting for gems. Eventually, once that pattern breaks down, a trough will come in. You're going to have those 70s dew points just sitting over the Gulf of Mexico, and it's going to pull those northward, and you're going to pay the price and probably have a big tornado outbreak across the central and southern U.S. to end this pattern and probably begin 2022, which I think is going to be a legendary year for tornadoes, probably a tragic year as well. Going through the winter into the spring with this year 2 La Nina, the cold PDO in the northeastern Pacific, just looks like it's going to be a active long range. So we do have a day 4 risk for severe weather. Let's break this down a little bit more in detail. And I know that we've been focusing a bit heavily on the January 1st and 2nd trough ejection, but we still do have this potential on the 29th. Good. This is 0Z on the 29th, and it shows big instability across the Mid-South, Louisiana, Mississippi, into southern Alabama. Let's take a look at the upper levels. And it does have a bit more of a wave. You can see this wave coming in. This is 0Z in the 29th. And there is a bit of a southern branch to that stronger flow. Some subtle cyclonic curvature here. It is shearing out over top that ridge downstream. Most importantly, let's look at the low-level jet. And there is a decent low-level jet down here as well. That's going to be increasing with time as you go through the evening. And look at those EHIs down on the 29th as well. Portions of Mississippi, Alabama at 0Z. Clicking on a sounding down there. Central southern Mississippi, quite favorable. photographs. Even though your 1 kilometer wind is 30 knots, you have a lot of directional shear with this trough, forcing more due easterly storm motions at about 40 knots. Pretty stout elevated mix layer being depicted by the NAM as well. Let's drill down a little bit closer. Here's your 0 to 3 kilometer EHI at 0Z, and these are probably going to ramp up as you go from 0Z through the middle of the night. There you go. There's your models. Let me show you the dew points down there in that warm sector for the NAM, showing you those upper 60s dew points across central southern Mississippi, even pushing some 70s down there, southeastern Louisiana. Definitely looking like some pretty favorable conditions out there. Your surface low, not much surface convergence down there. Not much of a surface low as well down here way to the south, so it's going to require these subtle convergence bands. Maybe a little bit of at the nose of that low-level jet. Could be enough convergence to excite some storms to develop. But the environment overall is certainly supportive of tornadic supercells to develop. This is just the regular NAM, and the regular NAM is hinting at some of these renegades developing across central southern Mississippi, central and southern Alabama as well. Definitely hinting at a prefrontal confluence band here from southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, into southern Alabama as well. That's going to have to be something that we keep a very close eye on. Likely going to have to chase all of these days. But this is one of these preceding events, and even though I say lower end, that means that I just don't expect this to be a major outbreak, but it certainly has outbreak potential if these storms do develop in this environment. Your low-level flow is supportive of supercells along the southeastern periphery of this stronger 700 flow, stronger 500 flow out there. And you do get a little bit of a squeeze play between this anticyclone over the southeast and the trough way to the north to excite a bit of a low-level jet. I do think, though, that these renegades are probably going to focus over central Mississippi into central Alabama a bit more. This is 84 hours, so once we get a little closer to this event, I do think that we're going to learn a lot more about it. But it does look like some severe weather potential and tornado potential here. That's why we have that day 4 risk area. December 29, Wednesday night. Looks like southern Alabama, southern Mississippi certainly could have some severe weather potential across portions of the Mid-South. So looks like the NAM and the European model does have a stronger trough, maintaining a bit more of its identity as it punches into the central U.S. and lifts up toward the southern Great Lakes, and that's going to drag with it some decent bulk shear and about a 30-knot low-level jet here across Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. So I do think there is some severe weather possible the night of the 29th, and that includes some tornado potential, but that big trough ejection still looming on January 1st and 2nd with that pattern shift. Then some continental air clears out the Gulf of Mexico a bit, and we should have a breather relative to that severe weather across the Mid-South. So thank you, everybody, for joining my weather report. Hopefully you enjoy the snow if you're living out in the Mountain West. Stay tuned to these weather briefings if you live in the Mid-South, December 29, January 1st, and also January 2nd across the southeastern U.S. Looks like a 1-2 punch of big-time trough ejections. Never stop chasing.